Take a little trip with me, I'm gonna take you home.
Take a little history down this lane of memories.
Down this lane.
So let's raise another glass for the glorious past and the friends we have become. Yeah, 'cause little did we know the good times come and go, but the best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Over the last 2 days, serious differences have emerged between the government in Delhi and the government in West Bengal. They are to do with health issues connected with coronavirus and financial issues connected with the lockdown. With me to talk about both these issues, as well as the bigger picture facing the people of India, is the Finance Minister of West Bengal, Amit Mitra. Dr. Mitra, on Monday, the central government sent 2 Inter-Ministerial Central teams to West Bengal to assess the COVID-19 situation. In her letter to the Prime Minister, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said this was a breach of established protocol. Can you begin by telling me what is the breach?
I think, first of all, it is really strange that after 3 hours of the arrival of the teams, that Honorable Chief Minister spoke with the Home Minister. So no information reached the Chief Minister. Took 3 hours for the information to reach her. When the team landed, 20 minutes before they landed, some letter of sort was sent by Ministry of Home Affairs to an official. But Chief Minister spoke with the Home Minister 3 hours after the team had landed. Now, during the video conference with the Honorable Prime Minister, the Chief Minister said, "We will cooperate fully with you with an open mind." She also said that any kind of support and discussion we are ready to do, and she made a detailed presentation to the Honorable Prime Minister. So there was trust. Now, all of a sudden, this team arrives without information. The protocol is that you're supposed to call the state, discuss with them, and work it out together. Because at the end of the day, when you arrive at a state, it is the state which will have to take you to the districts. It will have to arrange its security. So suddenly you arrive, and I'm also very surprised that at that time I'm told that Border Security Force is the guest house where they stayed, and Border Security Force was associated with them. Okay. Obviously, this is basically cooperative federalism offered by the Honorable Chief Minister to the Prime Minister of India.
I understand, Dr. Mitra.
This was based on trust.
You're saying that there were several breaches of protocol, the most important of which was that the state was not informed in advance. The Chief Minister was only informed after the teams arrived. Now, on Twitter, the Chief Minister said the basis on which 7 districts in West Bengal had been identified for closer scrutiny was not clear, and until clarification was given, she added, "We would not be able to move ahead on this, as without valid reasons, this might not be consistent with the spirit of federalism." Many people interpreted that Twitter message as defiance of the central government. Can you assure the audience this is not defiance, this is simply an attempt to seek clarification?
I think it is absolutely clear when the Chief Minister herself is assuring the Prime Minister few days early, one-on-one basis, also extending support, saying that let us have a discussion. In fact, her words are any constructive suggestions made and discussion, we will be cooperating with you. After that, this happens is a very dangerous precedent to federalism itself.
I'll tell you why people suspected that that message on Twitter might have been not just clarification seeking, but defiance, because yesterday evening, your governor, Mr. Dhankar, said on NDTV that Mamata Banerjee had established a tradition of defying the Prime Minister. He said she had deliberately not participated in Tali Thali, and she had deliberately not participated in the 9-minute lighting of diyas. The governor claims that the Chief Minister is deliberately defiant of the Prime Minister's orders.
I would not like to comment too much on the Honorable Governor because the kind of tweets every morning he tweets. And every time he tweets, there is a controversy in the state. I'll give you an example. He tweeted saying, officers should be shown the door. Officers who he thinks are not doing their job. He even said paramilitary forces should be brought to Bengal. This is in a tweet. Now, he is the governor of the state. Repeatedly, there has been clarity on every circle that you ask that his tweets are not, it does not behove what the governors in the past and the great tradition of governor in whose name every notification in the state goes out from the government.
Okay.
In the manner in which he tweets, saying we will call paramilitary forces should be brought to Bengal and officers who he thinks are not suitable should be shown the door. I'm quoting him.
I
don't want to get into the governor, what the governor says.
I accept your point that you have a particularly provocative governor, but Derek O'Brien, your party leader in the Rajya Sabha, is equally provocative. He said yesterday that the decision to send these two inter-ministerial teams was adventure tourism. And the question people ask is, how at a time of crisis and why at a time of crisis has the relationship between the West Bengal government and the central government reached this sorry low point? Why has this happened when the state's in a crisis?
I think the very important point you're making is, what was the criteria? The Honorable Chief Minister wrote a letter to the Prime Minister saying, what is the criteria of the arrival of this team? Let us say, the Joint Secretary was heard saying the criteria is number of cases. That was criteria 1. And criteria 2 was the rate of increase of the number of cases. This was said by the Joint Secretary, Mr. Agarwal, as the only explanation came much earlier from the government. Now, take the case of Gujarat. What is the total number? 2,066 cases, 77 dead. Ahmedabad city has 1,077 cases, increase by 239 cases. Now, obviously, that is as per the criteria being suggested by a Joint Secretary of the Government of India. Why was Ahmedabad not selected? Why out of the 4 states to which the team goes, 3 are ruled by the opposition? It is not the Bengal Chief Minister's issue only. It involves a much broader federalist defiance process of the very fundamentals of federal principles at a time when we should be cooperating shoulder to shoulder. So what Mr. Derek O'Brien said.
Are you suggesting, Dr. Mitra, that the government is actually deploying these teams not on the basis of need or not on the basis of objective criteria, but to carry out politics, perhaps even to carry out some sort of vendetta? Is that the suggestion from you, that this is politics rather than medical need?
It is very sad that the data shows something that is very, very sad. The selection of Kalimpong district, newly created district, Darjeeling district. Kalimpong has hardly any cases. So it neither fits the notion of large number of cases, nor does it fit the notion of increase in number of cases, the incremental growth. Now, why Darjeeling and Kalimpong? Whose discussion was this with? So what it means is, if the Government of India, in its wisdom and the required protocol, had spoken with the state and said, we want to look at work with you together, have first a discussion in the Secretariat with the Chief Secretary, and then decide in the meeting if there's any need for the central team to have more information. That is the normal protocol that is followed. So what Mr. O'Brien is saying, is absolutely based on data. I want to know from UP, you have 1,294
Can I
cases.
interrupt? Are you therefore saying, Dr. Mitra, that the central government is playing politics with you? That's the suggestion. Are you saying that as well?
This is the feeling among a lot of people who watch this process only based on data. Why Bengal? Why? What was the reason? Was there a discussion? If you just go into it very objectively and calmly, you will find that this cannot be justified. No information, 3 hours later, information comes. Is that something that is normal?
Can I,
That's
can,
the districts
can I
selected are
make one
just
point?
absurd.
Can I make one point? You said
Yes.
that this has happened to two other opposition governments. Rajasthan is one of them, Maharashtra is another. Yet those two governments have not protested in the way that West Bengal has. Why has your response and reaction been so adverse, whereas they have accepted what's happening?
We don't know exactly what happened with them. It would be wrong for me to surmise what happened, whether there was a discussion with them or not, whether the districts selected were there or not. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. I can only tell you it is shocking that you speak, the Honorable Chief Minister is informed 3 hours later, districts selected. I've given you the example of Kalimpong and Darjeeling in the hills, which have absolutely no reason. So what is the criteria? It is
Okay,
in violation of Government of India's own criteria.
I
So
take your points up. Let's move beyond this. Let me raise with you a couple of issues that have been flagged by the media. They've also been flagged by Lav Agarwal in his press conferences. The first concern is that West Bengal is testing far too few people. In fact, the Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court on the 18th asked the government to give a deeper look at the requirement of more samples to be tested on a war footing. So even your Chief Justice feels you're not testing enough.
I think what is important are two, three things that your listeners must understand. 425 tests are being done a day, which has now risen to 600. But more importantly, just today, last evening, I'm told, so it means it's in the news today, Indian Council of Medical Research says exactly what West Bengal had said. The antibody test's accuracy, they say, is only between 6% and 71%. So let me also confess to you that the initial tests sent to us in very small numbers from the Government of India, from National Institute of Virology, were okay. Very soon, when the demand for it increased all over the country, they started sending us just a few dribble of NICED tests, which became ambiguous. So we test it in the hospital, we test it in our lab, and we find that there's inconsistency. Today's information from Indian Council of Medical Research confirms West Bengal's concern that the first, we were getting very few number of test kits. Number two, the kits that were coming were taking more time because they were giving unambiguous results.
So you're
Today,
saying,
ICMR's decision that 6% of reliability up to 71% in that range is a very dangerous outcome. They have stopped the testing
so you're
for
saying,
2
Dr.
days
Mitra,
of
that the
antibody
reason,
tests.
you're saying the reason why the tests look too few in number in Bengal is because the test kits you were sent were unreliable. In other words, they were not functioning properly. Is that right?
Which has now been confirmed with ICMR. Let me tell you, what was to be sent is RT-PCR test. This is a test that directly tests the virus, not the
Okay.
antibodies.
I
Now,
understand the point
today's,
about tests.
I must
I understand the point
tell you,
about tests.
today's revelation of ICMR, Karan, Mr.
You're saying,
Thapar,
sir,
what I'm saying is today's test of a warning of all over India not using the antibody test for 2 more days is an indication that what West Bengal was saying, that we are getting tests which are unreliable, giving contradictory result, has been confirmed by ICMR today. The
let me
country
get,
must know that.
okay, you've made that point. Let me raise with you a second concern about West Bengal's handling of coronavirus. You've appointed what's called an audit committee to determine whether the deaths are due to coronavirus or other comorbidities. And many people feel this might be an attempt to hide coronavirus deaths. How do you assure them this is not an attempt to hide COVID-19 deaths?
I think this is completely a canard. It is a complete false propaganda. The committee consists of very eminent people. By the way, your listeners must know that Mamata Banerjee has formed a global advisory council for this, which involved in it is Abhijit Banerjee, the Nobel Prize winner, top doctors from abroad, 3 of them, and doctors from India. Let me also tell you, if we were to hide something, what would be our preparation like? Now, 66 hospitals in West Bengal, unlike many states that I know, have been defined as COVID hospitals, separate. Number of COVID beds already created in Bengal is 8,000. You know how many have been occupied? Only 178. Number of ventilators we have kept in ready, 1,500. You know how many has been used? Only 10. And number of swab samples tested is close to 5,000 3 days back. 4,630, 3-4 days back. Now it must have climbed to a large number.
Okay.
So this committee that you speak of consists of the most eminent people because, as you know, there can be a death due to morbidity. That means you can have a heart problem, you can have a kidney problem. Now we want to make sure that this high-powered, world-class committee quickly goes into it and makes sure it is not due to morbidity, but it is due to coronavirus. Most scientific approach to this.
2 quick questions. Are you saying that the committee headed by Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee is the committee that will determine whether this is a COVID death or a comorbidity death? Is that
No. That is a global advisory committee which has
So then
5 doctors.
What is the committee?
But
What
the
is
committee
audit
itself, let me say, the committee formed in West Bengal under the government is the most famous doctors across the field who are very competent and nobody questions their credentials.
But will there
So
be
the
any
idea
pressure?
is,
Sir, will there be any pressure on this committee of eminent doctors to actually lessen the number of COVID deaths and to
Now,
instead suggest they're because of TB or cardiac or hypertension?
why would one do that if one has created the largest infrastructure in the country among states, to my understanding? 66 hospitals ready, 8,000 beds ready, 1,500 ventilators ready. So the question is, we have prepared in a massive manner. So why we should hide any tests?
Okay.
And the doctors, are we questioning the credibility of these eminent doctors who together quickly decide
Can you
on
name
separating morbidity versus corona deaths?
Could you name 1 or 2 of the doctors? That would be very reassuring if you could name 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, I don't have the list here, but I know at least 2-3 of them. One is the world famous person who is in the SSKM hospital, head of the Department of Gastroenterology, considered to be one of the world authorities. Mr. Chaudhary, Dr. Chaudhary, he is there. I know
that
3
you
of
have
them personally,
and
they
I'll
are
take
absolutely impeccable.
that it's not in your interest to hide COVID deaths. Let me put you a final concern about the way COVID is being handled in your state. It's being said that you're not enforcing the lockdown adequately or properly. And one example is that your chief secretary, Mr. Sinha, has permitted flower shops and sweet shops to open till noon. Why? These aren't essential. Why are they operating? Why are they open?
Now, what is important here is to understand that 4 days before the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, announced a very strategic lockdown where cities and specific districts were locked down. This is 4 days before the Prime Minister. So, and since then, there has been consistent process of carefully structured lockdown, and there has been no let up on that.
But
As
sir,
far as
forgive me, I
Mishti,
don't mean to
Mishti,
interrupt you, but Rajiv Sinha, your chief secretary, only yesterday, that sweet shops and flower shops could stay open till noon. Previously, they could stay open till 4 p.m. He's now reduced it to noon. But the question is, why are they open at all? Sweet shops and flower shops are not essential items. Why are they open?
I think it is very important for somebody who is not from Bengal to understand that as long as systematic process is maintained in terms of distancing, for which Mamata Banerjee went into a marketplace and defined the rounds, the circles that are being drawn outside of shops, were initiated by the Chief Minister herself on television, so that it spreads, this idea spreads everywhere. Now, Mishti shop, as you know, Mr. Thapar, you've come to Kolkata, you know that Mishti Doi and Mishti for 3-4 hours, along with vegetables and bread and butter, which are all open, is a part of the tradition of the state, as long as there is appropriate distancing.
What
Now,
about
flower shops, they're not flower shops you're talking about. You're talking about flower markets with, just like vegetable markets, with appropriate distancing, very carefully monitored by the police. I have seen on video how the police have monitored. The flower is used for puja every morning. It is a part of keeping your spirits up in this process of lockdown. And there, as long as the police and the administration successfully does proper distancing, which I've seen on television, how carefully that is being done, these two exceptions are made because of the tradition of the state,
all
and
right?
there has been no cases out of that. Please
Okay.
come and see
I,
how systematically it's
I
being
accept,
done.
I accept the answer you've given. Audiences will obviously judge for themselves. So far, Dr. Mitra, we've talked about what I call differences between the West Bengal government and the central government in Delhi over issues, medical and health issues to do with coronavirus. I want to now move to differences between the two governments over financial responses to the lockdown. I believe, I
Before you
believe,
do that, Mr. Thapar, let me submit to you. There isn't, the spirit of the Chief Minister to the Prime Minister directly has been one of cooperation. But transgression took place in the case, which you have cited 2 days ago, in terms of arrival of these teams. So there is no fundamental contradiction between the state's intent of cooperating in a federalist polity, evidenced by letter of the Honorable Chief Minister to the Prime Minister, constructive support, suggestion, in a video conference face to face, the same offer. So please don't make it feel as though there is some war going on here. Basically, we will not accept anything that is against the federalist principle. We will protest. That's a part of democracy. Do you want us to be throttled on that? That you violate federalist principles and we don't even speak out or send a letter? Overall, the Chief Minister has been very gracious in extending full cooperation.
I accept that point. Let's now move beyond the differences over health and medical treatment for coronavirus to the differences that you have with the central government over financial responses to the lockdown. Now, I believe that as Finance Minister of Bengal, you have asked of Nirmala Sitharaman for 3 specific financial measures. In response, she's half accepted one of them, but not the other 2. Can you explain to the audience briefly what are these 3 measures and which is the one she's half accepted?
Let me submit to you that I have written 8 letters to Honorable Union Finance Minister, not 3 or 4, 8 letters. Each one of them contained suggestions. The one that you are citing relates to debt management. Now, that is not the key. Let me explain that simply. Honorable Chief Minister asked the Prime Minister that states are allowed to borrow 3% of their GDP. That's called the FRBM Act. So we got a letter from the Union government about a month ago saying we will allow you to borrow 4,300 crores more above the limit, but for that you have to pass a legislation in the legislature. Good. We immediately passed, luckily legislature was on, we immediately passed on the last day of the legislative assembly that particular idea that we can exceed the FRBM limit by 4,300 crores. Now, then came the COVID-19 in full force. So what the Honorable Chief Minister said is, please extend the 3% to 5% of GDP to give us some headroom with relation to the liquidity that is possible in the state. Now, no response have come to that. Number two, ways and means, which is like a little bit of a Lakshmi ke bhar, it's a kitty with which you manage your finances. You can take out, but within 15 days you have to put it back. I had said in my letter, please double the ways and means allowed today. Double it. And how much money am I talking about? From about 1,500 crores to 3,500 crores, which we can use every day in managing our finances. Now, first the RBI increased that by, the Union Finance Minister in a tweet said we'll increase the ways and means with this. Now the Reserve Bank Governor 2 days ago said we'll increase it by 60%. My problem is this incremental approach. I had asked for doubling. That was it. It's not a big loan. It is something you manage loans with. So any letter that I've written, I've got no response. The only one done by the government related to this, I've written a letter also, as you know, on the question of GST. Now, let me put it into two buckets. One is where we are asking for direct monies. Here the Chief Minister has written to the Prime Minister saying, please allocate 25,000 crores to the state in order in this COVID condition. That would be a part of the larger package in the country. Then the second thing that we are talking about relates to specificity of grants being given. Can you believe 36,000 crores of central schemes have not been paid to West Bengal?
There's a danger the detail you're giving will confuse the audience. I'm going to simplify and repeat back to you what you said. Please tell me if I'm right or wrong. The Chief Minister asked for the borrowing limit to be extended from 3% to 5% of state GDP, to which he's got no response whatsoever. You were given permission to exceed by 4,300, but that's nowhere near enough. The bigger demand to exceed from 3% to 5%, no response from the Prime Minister, silence. You have been given some concession over ways and means, but not the doubling that you want. You also asked for two other things: a moratorium for 9 months on repaying loans. You got no response. You asked for relaxation on overdrafts from 36 to 60 days. Again, you got no response. So your main grouse is that on many critical financial issues, either raised by you as Finance Minister or by the Chief Minister, there's been no response. You've written 8 letters and you haven't got a response. Have I summed that up accurately?
Yes,
give me a yes or no.
very well. I think only one point I'd like to bring out from what you said. This year, we are expected to pay 56,000 crores as debt servicing. That means repayment and interest. That is the 9 months moratorium we asked for. It is absurd in this situation where we have no GST taxes coming in, which is 70% of the revenues collected by the state. No property is getting registered, which is where you pay stamp duty and state makes money, etc. We said, how can we pay 56,000 crores, which we have done till last year successfully because we had enough revenue and no reply.
Point is you got no response. The important point is you got no response. Is that right?
You got no response. Absolutely right.
In other words, every time on critical issues, you've got no response, which is akin to saying, the central government didn't even bother to reply.
Well, you have to ask them why they haven't replied. I did have a conversation with the Honorable Union Finance Minister on one occasion, and I pointed out to her some of these things. The letters have been appropriately received, and obviously they are available to her. But the Prime Minister has the Chief Minister's letters, but it's unfortunate that we have not got any reply, and only a dribble, which was the ways and means increase, which we asked for doubling to first 30% increment and now 60%.
Yeah.
So
Let's not repeat the details. Let me try and sum up this section by putting this to you. It seems to me, as an outsider, and I'm pretty sure it will seem to a lot of the audience too, that what we're seeing between the West Bengal government and the central government, whether we talk about the financial issues or whether we talk about the health issues, is politics by another name. Trinamool and BJP, it's no secret, don't get on with each other. You probably don't like each other. You see yourselves as rivals in Bengal. And now, at a time of crisis, this politics is playing out. And the only people who will lose are the people of Bengal. Isn't this a very sad and sorry situation?
I think it is. It is very sad that Chief Minister officially asked the Prime Minister for an aggregate package in the economy, not just Bengal, but for all states, of 10 lakh crores, which is 6% of our GDP. What have they given so far? 0.8%, 1.7 lakh crores for the country as a whole. Now, she asked for this where United States has given 2 trillion GDP, Japan 20%, UK 15%. It's not just us.
Because you're talking about what I want to raise in part two. We'll conclude part one here. Part one was essentially about the differences that have arisen between the governments in Calcutta and Delhi over the medical and health handling of coronavirus and the financial handling of the lockdown. In part two, I want to talk to you not just as Finance Minister of Bengal, but also as one of the longest serving Secretary Generals of FICCI. It's a job you held for 17 years, about the bigger picture facing the Indian people. But first, a little break and a message from our sponsor, Glenlivet.
Take a little trip with me, I'm gonna take you home.
Take a little history
Take a little
down this lane of memories.
down this lane.
So let's raise another glass for the glorious past and the friends we have become. Yeah, yeah, 'cause little did we know the good times come and go, but the best is yet to come.
Welcome back for a special interview for The Wire. My guest is the Finance Minister of Bengal, Dr. Amit Mitra. And remember, he was also the longest serving Secretary General of FICCI, a job that he held for an unprecedented 17 years. With that background, Dr. Mitra, I want to talk to you about the bigger national picture. The Centre for Monitoring the Indian Economy says that during the 4 weeks of the lockdown that have already passed, unemployment has shot up to an astonishing 26%, and 140 million people have lost jobs. As a finance minister and as a former Secretary General of FICCI, do you think that sounds right?
In fact, my estimate is much more horrific. The total workforce, labor force in India in 2019 was approximately 530 million people. 530 million, 53 crores. Now, 93% of these workers are in the unorganized sector, according to most estimates. It varies between 86% to 93%. Now, 93% unorganized means 500 million people are in the unorganized sector. To be accurate, 493 million. 500 million people in the unorganized sector. Let me assume that even half of them have retained their jobs. That means half of them have lost their jobs because they are unorganized. That gives you 200 million who today are completely marooned because there is no unorganized sector left. Even small and medium enterprises which are registered and are left, 246
So,
million.
can
CMI estimate is 26%. I'm telling you 46%.
the line broke while you were speaking, so I'm repeating the critical point you made. You believe up to 250 million people have lost their jobs. That's actually over 100 million more than the figure put out by the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy. Let's then come to what it is that needs to be done, and let's go through it sector by sector. First, I'm talking about daily wage workers, rural landless labor, and the tens, if not hundreds of millions of people who used to work in the unorganized sector but are now unemployed. Everyone accepts that the initial package announced by the finance minister at the end of March was simply inadequate. She hasn't done a thing more. Almost a month has gone by and she's done nothing more. So tell me today, for this 250 million who've lost their jobs, what is urgently required?
I think first of all is the resource, the big picture. It is clear that 6% of India's GDP can be immediately allocated as a package. Why do I say that? There are three advantages we have right now. First of all, you are aware that the debt GDP ratio, that means the capacity to do this, it's 106% in USA. It is 240% of the debt GDP ratio in Japan. We are only 69% debt GDP ratio. So we have the headroom. Number two, oil prices are at the lowest today, never seen in history before in recent history. We are 85% importers of petroleum products. So we have a huge advantage. Again, a headroom available. And lastly, foreign exchange reserve is at the highest level today in recent times. So again, it gives us a headroom. So just Mamata Banerjee said this to the Prime Minister on some logical basis. This is the three-peg logic where immediately you give the resources at the top. Now, once you give the resources at the top, then the question comes up of how you're going to spend it, which is for the poor. Now, here you'd be interested.
Can I stop with that? Can I stop there? Before we come to the spending, let me raise one issue of concern about a package which is 6% of GDP. This will have huge implications for the fiscal deficit. And as you know better than me, the combined fiscal deficit of the center, the states, as well as PSUs, what's called the public sector borrowing requirement, is set to be pretty close to 9%. How much further can we afford to kick it up? Or are you saying that at this time of crisis, the fiscal deficit doesn't really matter?
I think first is we can monetize our deficit, our fiscal deficit. Dr. Rangarajan had stopped when he was governor of the Reserve Bank, and today he has come around to the view that this is the time to do it. So what you do is you sell government papers to the Reserve Bank directly rather than secondary market. Reserve Bank gives you that money. Now, as far as fiscal deficit is concerned, economists who are otherwise very conservative in the United States or in Europe or Japan or wherever, there's a unanimity that at this time of COVID crisis, fiscal deficit ought not to be the conventional fiscal deficit, where you measure it as 3.5%, 0.5%. We cannot, it is a question of survival. By the way, today the Goldman Sachs and Nomura says that the GDP is going to shrink by 0.4%. Shrink. That means become smaller. Now, is this the time to quibble about fiscal deficit? No.
Okay.
Please take a leaf from John Maynard Keynes. This is the time to stimulate the economy as it happened in the Depression. Go out for it. Come out of the Lakshman Rekha and bat with the crossbat.
Let's then move on. You believe the government has to announce a fiscal package, a total stimulus package of 6% of GDP. Let's now break it down sector by sector. What would you do for the 250 million, and remember that's your figure, not mine, the 250 million who've lost their jobs, who are destitute and starving, and up to now, the finance minister has done very little for them. What would you say she must do immediately?
I think the first is what many years ago Milton Friedman called parachute dropping of resources. This is a term that was used in economics at that time, probably in a more jocular way. First is provide direct payment of survival money to the common people from this 10 lakh crores. We have in Bengal, we have done this completely digitally. We are paying everything digitally. So once the center gives us the money, we can digitally transfer to this unemployed, unorganized entity.
Do you have in mind a figure that you would put into every Jan Dhan account?
Well, in the case of United States, from the 2.2 trillion, I noticed they did about 50% was relating to direct payments. Now, those are international experiments. As far as we are concerned, we have, this is what we are asking for is not a huge sum per person because it's survival money. It would be something to the tune of about 40% of this total amount can go immediately and can be distributed by the states digitally. So there's complete transparency as we are doing for everything today.
Of the total amount of 10 lakh crore, 4 lakh crore should be distributed as survival money digitally. What about, I'm moving on quickly, what about universal distribution of rations rather than targeted through ration card holders? Would you be in favor of that for 6 months?
You will be happy to know that in West Bengal, universal distribution of ration has been introduced. And what is the price of rice? Zero. What is the price of wheat? Zero.
Are you suggesting this should happen nationwide as well?
This must happen nationwide. If West Bengal can do it, why can't the entire nation do this for the poor? You and I are not going to go to ration shop and stand in line. It is the poor who will be with distancing, will go there. This is their saving grace for a bowl of rice.
Let's now move to the MSME sector, which, as you know better than me, is 30% of GDP, 50% of exports. And as far as I know, all the finance minister has done is to give them a 3-month moratorium on their loans. What do you think needs to be done urgently for the MSMEs?
I'll give you an example. Immediate loan to be given to them because they don't have any liquidity. Their larger industry has not been able to pay them because they themselves are in doldrum. Therefore, they cannot pay their employees. First and foremost is give them liquidity. 4 years of loan. This has been done by other countries already. 1 year of which should be a total moratorium. So 4 years of loan to the MSME sector with 1 year moratorium, they will rejuvenate. They'll be able to pay wages to their workers once they have this liquidity.
Okay, let's now come to the formal sector, and in particular, let's talk about that element of it that is crippled by the lockdown. I'm talking about tourism, hospitality, I'm talking about non-essential retail, I'm talking about aviation, car manufacturers. As a former long-serving Secretary General of FICCI, you understand this sector better than any other politician. What do you think the finance minister should do for these people?
I think it is very simple. Again, their critical point for the formal sector is lack of liquidity. They do not even have today ready with them working capital, like MSME does not have any working capital. Larger ones are deficient in working capital. They will have to be given liquidity, they will have to be given loans, and that will come out of this package. Let me also say, in addition to the large industry, states have to be given direct loans by the Reserve Bank of India done by the Fed of the United States. Direct loan to states. Why can't states borrow directly from the Reserve Bank of India? Then they can use that as any form of incentive or any form of activity with the organized sector, infrastructure creation for them, which will help them at this time. So give the big industry immediate liquidity to be able to restart, feel comfortable.
Two quick questions there, sir. You suggested 4-year loans for MSMEs with a 1-year moratorium. Are you suggesting something similar for formal industry, particularly the industry that's crippled by lockdown?
Absolutely. For the larger industry, you can have a slightly nuanced package. Have a discussion with them. Find out what is the kind of loans. What is it, 4 years? Is it 2 years? Do you want a moratorium? What is the status of their liquidity? There's no discussion. So
Okay.
I would say, if I were in FICCI, I would urge FICCI to have a discussion with the government, with the industry, the stakeholders. So they will have to be infused with liquidity.
One more question on what you just said. You said that in fact the state should be allowed to borrow directly from the RBI. Is this how you would like the 2% extra borrowing that you want granted to happen? I know that that 2% from 3 to 5 hasn't been granted by the central government, but were it to be, would you like then the ability to borrow directly from the RBI?
I think this instrument can be worked out. Why? Because the Fed of United States has already worked it out. They are not only giving directly to the state governments, but to local governments, and they have a separate fund for, believe me or not, the Fed of the United States, which has no business in doing this, has stretched out. Why can't we? Why can't our Reserve Bank? I am suggesting come out of the crease.
What you're saying very clearly is the Fed has shown the way the RBI should follow.
It doesn't have to follow. It can moderate and modify according to our reality. But the key principle is RBI cannot today do only its traditional role, which is monetary policy, which is maintaining liquidity, which is putting an interest rate vis-a-vis repo rate or reverse repo rate. That role is for normal conditions. Come out of the crease, bat with a cross bat, come out of the Lakshman Rekha. And what is interesting is the Feds all over the world today are saying the same thing, that our traditional roles are today null and void. We have to come out and play a role which we have not played ever in our history. So I'm urging the Reserve Bank Governor with the Union Finance Minister together to come out of the crease and bat with a cross bat. This is not a T20. This is T0. This is T0. Either we survive now or never.
We're coming to the end of this interview, and I want to ask you one last question, and I'll ask you for a very short answer. Over the 4 weeks that the lockdown has lasted, what do you believe is the hit to the economy? Kanitkar and Jayaraman, writing in the Hindu a couple of days ago, estimated that it could be as much as 10 or 11% of GDP. Would you agree?
I would say that today we are looking at a GDP growth of a practically very close to zero. Maybe a percent GDP, we cannot say, because I must confess that at the end of the year, if COVID gets controlled by September, October, November, the animal spirit of the entrepreneur will set in. Unfortunately, the supply chain has been completely ruined. It has to be rebuilt. So we may have a little bit of GDP, but today it is interesting for me to see that Goldman Sachs and Nomura says it will shrink. And I would not be shocked if it does shrink.
Okay,
At
sir.
most a little bit of positive or a little bit of negative, provided when the COVID process ends, because if it doesn't end before December, January, we are looking at negative shrinking of the economy. If it ends by September, October, and the animal spirit is allowed 3 months, maybe 1% of GDP growth may happen at best, or we are looking at a negative growth of GDP, which is ruinous to the poor, because poverty has gone down in India because of the GDP growth.
We're going to have to end the interview there. My thanks to you for making time available to us in such full measure to discuss not just the medical and financial problems you've had with the government in Delhi, which you've discussed very openly and candidly, but also to talk about, with your experience as a former Secretary General of FICCI in the background, the big picture and what you believe the government must do, the size of package that's required, and what is then required for various sectors of the economy. Many thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.